Look at you.
I'll give you my restaurant if you cook something with what you find in the back alley trash. Thomas Mercer's words cut through the dining hall like a gunshot. Conversations die, glasses freeze mid-air. He stands tall, expensive suit, predator's gaze. The sound of rain against the windows mixes with the echo of his provocation. In front of him, Jack Holden, the man who once was the head chef of that very house, doesn't move. His face is steady, eyes calm. He doesn't need to ask if he heard it right. He caught every syllable, every intention. Thomas smiles, that kind of smile born from the certainty of power. Come on, Jack. Show us what talent does when dignity's gone down the drain. No one dares to laugh right away. The silence lingers too long. Then come the short, nervous laughs. Jack still doesn't respond. He just watches him. The man who fired him 2 years ago. The man who turned his life into a joke. Thomas raises his glass, red wine reflecting golden lights. Let's toast to the king of garbage. Now the whole room laughs, a laughter that cuts deep. Jack takes a step forward, and the laughter fades. For a moment, it seems like he's going to speak, but he doesn't. He simply turns his back and walks toward the kitchen. He moves down the narrow hallway, past the still hot kitchen filled with steam and aroma. Some staff stop what they're doing. They recognize the face. Former co-workers. One of them, a young assistant, lowers his eyes. Jack pushes the metal back door open, and the noise of the dining hall disappears, swallowed by the sound of rain outside. Outside, the alley is damp, surrounded by piles of boxes and delivery scraps. There's an old iron awning where water drips from the edges, forming puddles. He stops there, partly sheltered from the rain, and looks at the cold wall where the restaurant sign glows red. Mercer Fine Dining. A distant thunder rolls. His breath comes out as vapor. He's not nervous, he's present. The door opens behind him. The young assistant appears, hesitant, holding a black garbage bag. He doesn't say a word, just extends it. Jack takes it, nods slightly. The boy recoils, closing the door softly. Now it's just him and the sound of falling water. He tears the bag open, the wet plastic crackling. The smell is strong, a mix of cold grease, damp paper, and spilled wine. He starts sorting through the pieces, hardened bread, vegetable scraps, a chunk of meat still firm. His hands move with automatic precision, gestures of someone who once commanded a kitchen, who knows that food is respect, even when the world calls it waste. From inside, muffled laughter. Thomas speaks loudly enough to be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, the show has begun. Voices overlap, glasses and cutlery clinking to drown the shame. Jack keeps going. He finds an old dented pan between crates, wipes it with a wet rag, lights a small improvised fire with paper, wood and cooking alcohol. The match strikes. The flame flickers orange and alive. The firelight touches his face. He breathes in the heat. A woman in a red dress seated near the back window watches silently. She records. She doesn't smile. Outside, Jack stirs the fire, adjusts the pan, and the sound of rain on metal creates a steady rhythm. He opens another bag, rummages, sorts. Among peels and crushed cans, something gleams. He reaches slowly and pulls out a tomato, still whole, red, firm, as if it had hidden there, waiting to be found. He wipes it clean with his hands, rainwater running over the fruit. Jack holds it for a second, watching the firelight reflect on its smooth skin, then tucks it into his jacket. The camera moves closer. The fire glows in his eyes. Rain falls around him, the sound blending with the hiss of heated metal. Inside, Thomas laughs again. Too loud. But no one's listening anymore. It was never about what was in the trash. It was about what was still in him. Jack remains silent. His hands move calmly, sorting, cleaning, preparing. Inside, luxury tries to disguise discomfort, but the air has changed. What began as a joke now feels like a challenge. The fire crackles louder. Steam rises. The camera follows it upward, showing the contrast between the dark alley and the golden light of the restaurant. Jack stands there under the awning, cooking while the world tries to forget him. But in that instant, between rain and fire, he's already begun to win. Steam rises from the old pan, and the sound of rain hammering on the cans forms a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. The alley breathes with him. Jack tears open another bag, the wet plastic clinging to his hands, slipping. He opens it and spreads the contents on the covered ground. Pieces of hardened bread, potato peels, soaked lettuce leaves, 2 spoiled tomatoes. The rusty knife cuts through the silence. He works calmly, wiping each piece on the hem of his coat as if cleaning a memory. The fire flickers, orange light dancing over the wet walls. Across the street, a cat darts by. The city stays alive, indifferent. From the dining room, the back window now serves as a stage. The guests crowd to watch. Thomas, cigar lit, watches as if it were some grotesque performance. The reflection of the fire distorts his face in the glass. "Look, he's taking it seriously," he says, laughing. Some pull out their phones, filming, commenting between sips of wine. "Is this conceptual art?" someone asks. Thomas bursts out laughing, blowing smoke. "It's the kitchen of defeat." Jack keeps going. He grabs a dented metal pot, pours a little water from a forgotten bottle found in the trash. The sound of the liquid hitting metal is clean, sharp. He tosses the peels and scraps inside. Steam rises. The smell changes the air, still faint but real. The smell of food, not garbage. His hands move quickly, automatically, like a conductor leading an orchestra. The rain grows heavier, and he huddles under the narrow awning but doesn't stop. Cold wind blows from the sides, making the flames sway. A shadow approaches slowly, a filthy man, covered by a torn blanket. His footsteps splash through puddles. He stops a few meters away, watching, hesitating. Then he takes something from his pocket, a small shriveled onion, and extends it. Jack looks at him for a second, then hands over the bottle of water. The man drinks, smiles with broken teeth, and places the onion beside the pot. No words. He steps back and sits against the wall, warming his hands near the fire. Inside, the voices continue. Thomas is now on his phone, streaming live. "Gentlemen, behold what hunger does to pride." Today's lesson: even talent stinks when it loses its taste. He laughs alone, but the laugh sounds forced. Behind him, the woman in the red dress is still filming, her face expressionless. The lens of her phone trembles slightly. It's not fear, it's contained anger. The back door opens again. The same young assistant who brought the trash appears, holding a small bowl of salt and a wooden spoon. He looks around, then sets everything by the fire quickly, silently. Jack nods. The boy retreats, vanishing back into the darkness. Thomas sees him through the window and frowns. "Domestic betrayal?" he mutters. But no one answers. The sound from the pan grows louder. Steam covers Jack's face. He cuts the hardened bread, dips the pieces into the hot mixture. The smell now fills the alley. Something invisible shifts in the air. The homeless man watches, eyes hungry yet disciplined. Jack hands him a piece, and the man eats slowly, as if afraid to wake from a dream. Inside the restaurant, one guest covers her nose. Another, without realizing it, takes a deep breath. The scent of wet fire and toasted bread seeps through the glass. Thomas notices and forces a laugh. "Don't be fooled, gentlemen. That's smoke, not talent." But his voice trembles. He takes a quick sip of wine, avoids looking again. The fire's reflection makes it seem like there are 2 flames, one outside, one in his eyes. Jack stirs the pot, adds the salt carefully. The homeless man watches silently. The water bubbles and the orange glow of the fire spreads. The rain keeps falling around them, but it doesn't extinguish the heat. The alley seems to breathe, a small heart inside a vast city. Jack breaks the bread, splits it in 2, hands half to the man, and they both eat quietly. The fire lights their faces, 2 strangers, 2 survivors, surrounded by trash and light. On the other side of the glass, the audience watches. The laughter has stopped. No one speaks. The only sounds are the crackle of the flame and the echo of rain on rooftops. The fire reflects on damp faces, on attentive eyes. What began as spectacle is turning into something else. No one knows what, but everyone feels that something is being born out of nothing. Steam covers Jack's face, firelight reflecting on the metal of the pan. He cuts with precision, steady hands, focused eyes. Every movement is exact, almost silent, as if time itself obeyed him. Raindrops hit the edge of the awning, forming a constant rhythmic sound. The alley smells of smoke, toasted bread, and wet earth. The pot boils slowly. The sound is low, like a whisper. Inside the restaurant, Thomas watches through the window. The reflection of the fire flickers across his face. "Enough of this nonsense," he says coldly. "Turn off that fire before this becomes a circus." One of the guards moves toward the door, but is stopped by a female voice. "Leave him." It's the woman in red. Her gaze is firm, cold. The guard hesitates, turns to Thomas. The billionaire forces a smile, but the guests don't move. No one wants to be the first to act. Outside, Jack stirs the pot, adds a piece of bread, adjusts the flame. The smell drifts across the street. A bike courier, waiting at the light, lifts his head, sniffs the air, and dismounts. He drops his phone, approaches, curious. He stops a few meters away, under the rain. "What is this?" he murmurs to himself, but no one answers. He watches in silence. Thomas speaks louder again, trying to regain control. "Are you really impressed by a beggar cooking under a rusty roof?" But his voice shakes. On the other side of the room, a grey-haired man in a dark suit recognizes him. It's Richard Gale, a food critic and columnist. He stands up, wipes his lips with a napkin, and walks toward the back door. The guests exchange looks. The sound of chairs scraping is sharp. Thomas tries to stop him. "Richard, don't waste your time on this." The critic doesn't reply. He pushes the door open and disappears into the dim light. Cold air seeps into the dining room. Thomas exhales deeply, uneasy. Outside, Richard approaches slowly. The fire flickers on his face. Jack doesn't look up, keeps stirring the pot. The homeless man still sits against the wall, eating slowly. The courier stands still, caught between curiosity and respect. The city behind them remains alive. Distant horns, sirens, the city's hum. But in that small patch of ground, there is only the sound of fire. Richard watches how Jack works. The control of the flame, the quick cuts, the care in turning the bread inside the mixture. He steps closer, smells it, closes his eyes. A near-reverent silence settles. Jack notices him but doesn't turn him away. He breaks off a small piece and offers it. Richard hesitates. Rain runs down his expensive coat. He takes the piece, brings it to his mouth, chews slowly, his eyes close. Inside the restaurant, Thomas watches through the window, waiting for a reaction. But the critic says nothing. He stands there, still, breathing heavily, his gaze distant. His expression slowly shifts, from disbelief to something close to emotion. The sound of the fire grows louder. The flame reflects in everyone's eyes. Out of nowhere, Thomas's laughter dies, and the entire room seems held in that moment. Outside, the critic remains silent, motionless as the fire lights the alley and turns the darkness into something alive. Serve what he made. Thomas's command cracks through the air like a whip. The guests fall silent. The waiter, pale, hesitates with his hands over the white tablecloth. "Now," I said. The billionaire speaks slowly, each word pushed out with anger and wine. Outside, Jack gathers the pot, blows out the fire, and stands up. His clothes are damp, hair dripping. He arranges the improvised plates, takes a deep breath, and pushes open the metal door. The sound of wind and rain enters with him. The dining hall fills with cold and silence. Everyone watches him. His hands tremble slightly, but his gaze is steady. He walks between the tables, the scent of smoke and simple food invading the once perfumed space. The waiter tries to intercept him, but Thomas gestures sharply for him to let Jack pass. Jack sets the plates down on the main table. Thomas stares, his face stiff, trying to appear in control. "This is your art," he says, sliding a plate toward the critic, Richard. "Taste it. Let's end this farce." Richard grips the fork, inhales the rising steam. The food looks alive, colorful, impossible to ignore. He takes the first bite. For a moment, nothing happens. Then his face softens. He swallows slowly, eyes closing. Tears roll down, discreetly. The hall holds its breath. "This," he begins, voice trembling. "This has soul." Thomas scoffs. "It's hunger, not soul." But no one laughs. A second guest tastes it. The sound of a spoon tapping the plate is the only noise. "My God," a woman says. "It tastes like home." Jack stands still. He doesn't speak, doesn't smile, just watches. The critic rises. "This flavor, I know it." He looks around, searching his memory. It was the seasoning Mercer used before the menu changed. Thomas steps forward. Coincidence? But his voice no longer commands respect. The woman in red, still holding her phone, whispers, "It's not coincidence, he was the chef." The murmur grows. People look at one another. The older waiter confirms quietly, "Jack Holden, the restaurant's first chef, fired after an argument with Mr. Mercer." Thomas slams his hand on the table. Lies! The sound echoes through the hall. That man was fired for incompetence. But Richard's gaze cuts through him. No, I remember. He exposed the waste. I wrote about it. The audience begins to stand, some filming, others simply watching the owner unravel. Jack remains still, calm-faced. Thomas steps closer. What do you want, huh? To humiliate me? You want the restaurant? Take it. He pulls the keyring from his pocket and throws it onto the table, the metallic clatter bouncing off the glasses. Take it and get out. Jack doesn't move. The silence is absolute. The fire from the alley seems still to burn within him. Richard steps forward, picks up the key but doesn't hand it over. That's not what this is about, he says without looking at Thomas. He looks back at the plate. What he served here is what you lost. Respect. Thomas tries to laugh, but his throat is dry. The guests now watch him like witnesses to a fall. Once complicit, they step away. Jack turns to leave. Thomas grabs his arm, but the gesture is stopped by a waiter, the same one who brought the trash bag. The billionaire stares, stunned, as if the whole world had betrayed him. A man in the back, a food reporter, raises his phone, voice loud and clear. It's all recorded. Chef Jack Holden, unjustly fired for exposing food waste at Mercer Fine Dining, just cooked with what Thomas Mercer's kitchen threw away, and won. Thomas tries to laugh, but his voice cracks. His face flushes red. Sweat trickles down his temple. Lies, he shouts, slamming the table. This man is lying. He was fired for incompetence, for staining the restaurant's name. You don't know who he is. His voice bounces off the hall's walls, but no one answers. Everyone's holding up their phones, recording. The cameras capture every gesture, every drop of fury. Jack stands motionless. He doesn't defend himself, doesn't speak. He just keeps serving the remaining plates. A waiter approaches to help him, silently. Thomas notices, his eyes widening. What do you think you're doing? The waiter ignores him and places a plate before an elderly woman at the main table. The sound of cutlery is the only noise. Thomas loses his breath. You're all insane. That man's a fraud. Critic Richard, still standing, steps forward. No, Thomas. He's the reason your restaurant was ever respected. His tone is calm but firm. This man saved the flavor of the city when all you cared about was profit. The words slice the air. Thomas opens his mouth but nothing comes out. Guests exchange glances. Several kitchen staff appear at the doorway, motionless. One begins to untie his apron, then another. One by one they remove their aprons and lay them on the counter, forming a silent line behind Jack. Thomas looks at them, disbelieving. Traitors, you too? His voice breaks halfway. I gave you jobs. I gave you salaries. He chokes, the sound fading. The audience keeps filming. The live streams explode with comments, the glow of phone screens painting the hall in bluish light. Notification sounds echo, blending with the rain outside. Jack finishes serving the last plate, calmly. His hands are steady, his face unreadable. He sets the ladle back in the pot and wipes his hands on a cloth. Thomas steps forward. You're not walking out of here thinking you've won. His breathing is heavy, fists clenched. He grabs one of the plates and raises it high. For a second, time stops. Then the sound. The plate shatters against the floor, food and ceramic splattering across the marble. The noise is sharp, brutal. It echoes like a gunshot. No one moves. The sound of impact hangs in the air. Jack stares at him silently. Thomas is drenched in sweat, chest heaving. The guests step back, forming an empty circle between them. The woman in red is still recording, eyes fixed. Richard takes a step forward, places a hand on Jack's shoulder, but he doesn't react. He only looks at Thomas, his face free of hatred, filled only with truth. Thomas tries to speak again, but his voice falters. I built this. He looks around, searching for support but finds none. The employees behind Jack stand firm, hands clasped. The guests avoid his gaze. The wet floor reflects spilled wine, the chandelier's firelight, and the ruin of pride. Thomas's face gleams with sweat, his eyes trembling, his hands still dirty with food. He looks at Jack, who stands still, breathing slowly. The tension fills the air like smoke. Thomas takes a step back, stumbling over his own shadow. Jack says nothing. He just stares at him in silence, and that silence weighs more than any word ever could. The billionaire tries to regain his breath, his posture, his power, but the silence is a sentence. Then Jack takes a step forward. The sound of his boots echoes on the marble. He stops before the man who once humiliated him. For a moment, only the distant sound of rain and wind crosses the hall. Jack finally speaks, his voice hoarse, steady, never raised. "The trash you throw away is the respect you lost." The words cut through the air like a blade. No sound follows. The hall holds its breath. Then, suddenly, a timid clap breaks the silence. Then another, and another. Soon the entire room is standing, applauding. The noise grows, rising like a wave. Thomas shrinks, collapses into a chair, eyes empty, face pale. His hands tremble over the tablecloth. He looks around, lost, trying to understand when the world turned against him. Jack doesn't seem to hear the applause. He just breathes deeply, shoulders relaxed. Behind him, the staff who had removed their aprons stand in line, firm. Critic Richard remains standing, watching the man who turned waste into redemption. The woman in red, still holding her phone, walks slowly toward him. The noise fades to a low murmur. She reaches the table, pulls something from her pocket, the restaurant key, and places it in front of Jack. The metallic clink echoes through the air like a period at the end of a story. The keys hit the table with a dry sound. Jack looks at Thomas, then around the hall. Shattered glasses, wine on marble, tense faces. He takes the key ring with a steady hand. The silence holds for a moment that feels infinite. Then from the back, applause begins again, one then another like raindrops before a storm. The youngest waiter stands first, the staff follow. The tables rise in waves until the entire restaurant erupts in applause. The sound fills the same walls that minutes ago housed mockery. Thomas tries to speak, but no voice comes out. He takes a step, stumbles over shards, grabs the edge of the table to keep from falling. No one rushes to help him. The lights reflect off his red face, his broken pride. Jack neither approaches nor retreats. He simply meets his gaze, calm. He slips the keys into his coat pocket, then pulls one single key back out and raises it above his head. The clapping doubles. Now with cries of bravo and chef, a guest opens the main doors. Fine rain stamps the night. Outside, curious onlookers gather, phones raised, blue screens recording the moment when humiliation becomes justice. Jack walks to the main entrance, fits the key, turns it slowly. A click. The lock that had always excluded him yields as if in apology. He pushes the door open, lets the cold air sweep through the hall, and calls out without raising his voice, "Kitchen's open." The employees one by one put their aprons back on, this time by choice. The homeless man with the onion appears at the doorway. Jack gestures for him to enter first. Someone cries without hiding it. The smell of the recent fire still lingers. Now it's a promise, not a remnant. In the corner, Thomas tries to rebuild his mask. "This is a circus. You don't understand the complexity." The words wilt halfway through. Critic Richard just watches him, expressionless. Two investors, who had remained discreet until now, gather their cards and leave without saying goodbye. A journalist calls out, "Mr. Mercer, how do you justify throwing away good food while the city starves?" The billionaire opens his mouth, closes it again, feeling the weight of the question, and of every gaze upon him. The great man diminishes, like a neon sign burning out letter by letter. Jack returns to the center. He steps onto one of the dining room stairs and raises his arm, asking for silence. Thank those who stayed when it wasn't worth status. He points to the brigade, to the timid waiter, to the man from the street. Tonight, this place changes owner and meaning. A spontaneous toast rises, in glasses of water, in bare hands, in tearful eyes. The applause returns, louder now, pulsing in every chest. Notifications flash on screens. Former chef takes over restaurant after turning trash into a meal of dignity. The city applauds redemption. From arrogance to shame, Mercer's downfall. Within minutes, the sidewalk becomes a stage, and for once the audience is on the right side. Thomas, breathless, tries to recover ground. I built this." Jack steps down, stopping one pace away from him. "And you destroyed respect. From now on, no one eats behind the glass. No shouting, no performance, just truth." Thomas lowers his eyes. The applause that follows isn't against him. It's for something greater than he could ever give. Jack serves the first dish of the new era to the man who gave him the onion. The dining room responds as if an orchestra had received its cue. Stoves reignite, pans find fire, hands find purpose. People from the street walk in drenched and leave warm. The sounds now aren't of glasses breaking, but of cutlery sharing. At the back, the trembling waiter passes by Thomas and whispers a single word. Enough. A simple word, but a verdict. He walks to Jack's side. Others follow. When the last worker takes his place, the longest applause of the night shakes the ceiling. Jack raises the keys once more, not as a trophy, but as a promise. Welcome. That's all. The rest is said by the fire regaining meaning, by bread being shared without humiliation, by a city remembering a name it had tried to forget. Humiliation had come full circle, back to the man who cast it. Thomas steps back, then again, until he reaches the shadow of the door. There are no guards, no applause, no light to flatter him. Only the fine rain, the shirt clinging to his body, and the sound of a hall that lives without him. He tries to hold his chin high, but the weight of the night is heavier. The last thing that sees him is the window's reflection. It no longer returns a king, just an ordinary face. Inside, the final chorus swells. Jack, now owner by justice, receives embraces that ask for nothing in return. Someone writes in chalk on the daily menu board 2 words that seem to have waited years to appear there. Open house. The applause fades, but what remains no longer needs applause. And so, without shouting, without cheap spectacle, the city understands who won. The key in Jack's pocket weighs less than his story, and more than any signature. The old name outside commands nothing anymore. What commands, from that night on, is the taste of dignity.